First of all, I suppose that this particular piece of legislation has come before us again. 6 months ago we were here, 6 months before that, and while all of us recognise that COVID brought huge changes to our lives, and one of them was this new advent of a more, I suppose, almost European continental type lifestyle where people drink and eat outdoors, which we hadn't been doing up until then to any great extent. And we recognise the positive benefits of that. And I think the last time this legislation was before us, we spoke about how there was a need to reform a lot of these laws permanently to ensure that we had this in place permanently. And I acknowledge the Minister's reference to that and the work that's been done around the liquor licensing laws and the extension of trying to bring them into the 21st century, right from the Dancehall Act right the way back to previous legislation as well. And that work is welcome and ongoing, and we have all cooperated, I think, in trying to make it as positive as possible. But there are some concerns around it, and I think we also need to acknowledge that. We have had a huge problem in this country of alcoholism, of people becoming seriously addicted. We have a huge problem in this country of antisocial behaviour, and particularly in late-night situations, and we've seen it here in the city of Dublin and evidence of it in many areas as well around the country, of when alcohol is used to excess and the very negative impact that can have and all that flows from it. And I think we need to be conscious of that as well. I was recently in the United States, and it's one of the countries where we have very long opening hours of licensed premises, and one of the things that's very strict on there is the whole idea of people drinking in public and drinking outdoors at the same time. So I think really what we have to try and do here is find the correct balance, and I hope that we can do that. I'm also conscious, of course, that the whole tourism industry has been in turmoil, and that whole sector has had a very difficult couple of years, and look forward to hopefully better times ahead. That said, and I think it has to be said also, many of our hotels across the whole country at the moment, of course, are facilitating as accommodation for refugees and for people from Ukraine, who are very welcome there. And there's I think over 20% of our hotel rooms are taken up for that, or 25% I think of our hotel rooms are taken up for that particular use at the moment. And I know government have stated that one of the things they intend to do is to possibly that people from Ukraine who are staying in those hotels will not be provided food in the hotels. And I just wonder of the knock-on impact that will have. Will it mean that many of these hotels obviously will be getting a lower rate because of that? Will they decide to opt out of that because they want to get back to the business which they set themselves up for in the very beginning, of providing accommodation for people, either for tourists or for people in business or whatever that need hotel accommodation? And we could find that particular move may have a negative impact. So I think it's something that needs to be done with great caution and great care. Indeed, further to that, I think for many communities who have welcomed people from other countries, particularly from Ukraine, which is the most recent crisis, and indeed other people seeking international protection from other areas, there are huge issues in regard to resources. And of course, resource competition is something we've had in this country for a very long time, before anybody came from anywhere else. And people who are, whether they seek educational resources, or they seek health resources, or seek social resources, there's intense competition. And when other people come from other places and put more intensity into that competition, it causes friction and it causes difficulties. And I think there needs to be a huge effort by government, not only to ensure that we support communities, to welcome people as they do, but also to ensure that we put the resources in place, that it does not put too much additional pressure. And I think everyone in this House from all parties and none would understand that there is huge pressure, and many of our citizens out there are in dire need, particularly whether it be GP services or whether it be waiting lists in hospitals or SNAs in schools. All of those things are putting under more and more pressure as more people come from Ukraine and other countries, and we need to acknowledge that by ensuring that we put more people in place to provide those services. Going back to the piece of legislation we have here, I think the efforts that have been made to reform the alcohol laws and the whole issue of late trading and all of that is something that is very welcome, and I think we do have work to do in respect of that. And I know the Minister mentioned that it would be in 2023 that this legislation would hopefully be coming forward. So I expect that this will hopefully be the last time that we'll be renewing this particular piece of emergency legislation if the other legislation comes into place. And in that context, we have no difficulty in supporting it. But I think one of the difficulties with it from the very outset was that it went a distance that people weren't expecting, and that many of the local authorities didn't have provisions in place, such as bylaws, etc. There was also issues in regard to the Gardaí as to whether or not people drinking on the streets, how legal was it, and there was a grey area there. That gap was filled, but at the same time, there are difficulties around these things, and when rush legislation comes in, I absolutely accept and understand in the context of COVID there was no other way of doing it, but when rush legislation comes in, it does leave space for mistakes to be made, and I think we need to learn from those mistakes when we're putting permanent measures in place, as hopefully we will be doing with the new legislation that's coming forward. Finally, I think we understand that the efforts that were made through COVID by everyone across the board, and we all on this side of the House are critical of government for many reasons, when things could be done better, when more could be done. And there were instances more could be done where things could have been done faster, where people could have been supported more. But that said, I think the community in Ireland, to our credit, have done a great job in ensuring that we kept the numbers of people who contracted COVID, who died from COVID, who have long-lasting impacts of it, were kept to an absolute minimum. And I think that's something that we as a society and as a country should take credit for. As we move into an area where hopefully, and I know numbers are fluctuating at times and we have better medicines now to deal with it and all of that, but there are a lot of people out there who have long-term symptoms of COVID-19, and I know that there are serious issues in regard to how that's been dealt with. I know that the medical provision been put in place to assist people with long COVID is something that has undergone some reduction in services at the moment and in resources, and that's something I think the government need to refocus on and ensure that we do put the services in place for people. I know in my constituency office I've had people who are suffering from the long-term effects of COVID who find it very difficult to get the kind of assistance that they need. And I think that's something that the government needs to reflect on and ensure that the effort is put in to do everything we can to assist people who unfortunately contracted the disease and had the serious impact of a long-term health problem because of it. While the problems that business may have in regard as to how they can make profit or not is something we have to deal with, certainly, but the most acute thing that we have to deal with is ensure that people who have had long-term continuous health problems because of contracting COVID-19 get the resources they require, and that is a serious issue that I think government needs to deal with. Finally, as I say, we have no difficulty in supporting the ongoing provision of this particular piece of legislation, and hopefully it will be the last time we're doing this, and that full and proper measures will be in place before we return here in 6 months.